Everyone. Good afternoon. This is the Mobility Coordination Working Group meeting. Today is September 30th, 2024, and it is 2 p.m. We're going to go ahead and get started. So as part of our meeting, we're going to go ahead and move forward with introductions. So with that being said, I am Janine Sullivan. I am the Transportation, Mobility, and Accessibility Program Manager here at Pima Association of Governments. And in no particular order, I'm just going to go ahead and go by the names that I see on the screen of who's in attendance today. And if you could just do a brief introduction, saying your name, organization you represent, and perhaps just a brief characterization of the service that you do in our region, that would be helpful. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and call on Mike Alexander.
Yes, Mike Alexander, Oro Valley Sun Shuttle Dial-A-Ride. We operate the Dial-A-Ride service, obviously, in Oro Valley, and we take passengers throughout Tucson. The general public stays in Oro Valley. Seniors and those with disabilities go out through Tucson area.
Thank you, Michael. And then Sherry.
Hi, I'm Sherry Seasonup, and I work at Coyote Task Force. Do I need to say something else?
If you could share a little bit about the service that Coyote Task Force does in our region, just for those that might not be as familiar, that would be helpful. Just a couple sentences is sufficient.
Briefly, we're a nonprofit that's over 30 years old, and we help people recovering from severe mental illness find employment. And besides a clubhouse, we also operate a resale shop and a cafe and actual restaurant downtown where they get some of their training.
Great. Thank you, Sherry. I appreciate it. And then I know Meg, you're traveling, but if you're able to do a brief introduction, that'd be great. Otherwise, we will acknowledge that you're here and want you to drive safely, and we will move on to someone else. All right, I'm going to let Meg focus on driving. So I'm going to reach out to Nicole.
Hello, this is Nicole Anderson. I'm with Fellowship Square Tucson. I work as the advancement director in the corporate office in Phoenix, and we are a nonprofit senior living community in Tucson, and we have over 600 residents that we are happy to have be part of the Tucson area.
Great, thank you so much. All right, and then Tony.
Yes, I'm Tony Bruno. I'm in Southern Pima County. I work for Valley Assistance Services, and we work to keep seniors in their homes. We have 7,000 clients in Pima County, and we operate from about Pima Mine Road to the county line out to Arivaca and over toward Helvetia. We provide non-medical transport or non-emergency medical transport. And also we do errands with our clients as well.
Great, thank you, Tony, appreciate it. And then I see Carl.
Yeah, I'm Carl Steinecker, a supervisor here at Oro Valley Dial-A-Ride. We provide services for general public, seniors, and ADA in the Oro Valley town.
Great, thank you so much, Carl, I appreciate it. And then Steve Knapp.
Good afternoon, I'm Steve Knapp. I'm the operations manager at Hope Inc. We are a peer support, consumer-run peer support organization with center sites across southern Arizona, sites across northern Arizona. We do peer support, counseling, substance abuse outreach, transition, either coming from treatment or from jail. Just a little bit of everything.
Great, thank you so much. Sorry, Steve, apologize.
No, that's okay. I was just saying we have roughly 55 vehicles across that state to be transported.
Okay, great. Thank you. I had a tiny bit of difficulty hearing you there towards the end, so I apologize for clipping you. And then before I ask Mandy to introduce herself, I noticed that we have one individual who has called in, but their name isn't showing up. So I'm just going to take a pause here before we introduce Mandy and ask for the person who just dialed in to state their name and organization real quick.
So I just logged in, Michelle Hernandez. I did register. I'm not sure.
Okay. I think you're showing up perhaps twice because I see your name listed, but then I also see another number. So did you click the link to join the meeting and then call in as well?
No, I just clicked the link to join in.
Okay, so it might be someone else then.
Janine, I just logged in as well. This is Irma, but I clicked the link as well, so I don't know if it's showing me or.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Yes,
Hi,
can you
I'm
hear
sorry.
me?
My name's Kimberly Trevino from Catholic Community Services Southern Arizona. I'm the one that just called in.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kimberly. I appreciate it.
All right. Sorry, thanks.
All right. So we will circle back to Kimberly to do a more complete introduction. And so I promised Mandy that I would allow her to do her introduction and then we'll continue on. So good afternoon, Mandy. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Mandy Hendricks. I work with Easter Seals Blake Foundation, and we provide a wide variety of human services here in Southern Arizona. The department that I work with specifically provides services to individuals with intellectual and or developmental disabilities, and a large part of that is providing transportation.
Thank you, Mandy. I appreciate it. Nicole?
Is there more than one? I already responded.
Oh, I'm
earlier.
sorry. Nicole Anderson?
I responded from Fellowship Square Tucson.
Yeah, did you want to sorry, just elaborate a little bit more about Fellowship Square?
Oh,
Just for those that might not be quite as familiar.
Okay, I did earlier, but I will be happy to. We have over 600 residents at a nonprofit senior living community in Tucson. And we are just very happy to be a part of the community and look forward to being a part of this program and seeing where it goes.
Thank you, Nicole. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I know you did your introduction earlier, so
Oh, no worries.
just try to give a little extra time for those that are newer to the working group to be able to share any additional insights that they'd like to share for those that might
Perfect.
not be quite as familiar with their organization. Yeah.
Perfect. And
So-
Michelle Hernandez is also with our Tucson campus, and she could give you a little more information as well if you'd like.
Okay, all right. Thank you. So on that note, Michelle, would you like to add anything?
Well, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm the Director of Resident Experiences and Activities here in Tucson. We're a nonprofit retirement community. Transportation is a huge part of the amenities that we offer the residents. Traveling out off the campus for dinners, doctor appointments, a range of things, grocery shopping. It could be as serious as a doctor's appointment or something as simple as they just want to go get some coffee. So transportation is a major deal for our campus.
Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate it. And then Shaylin?
Hi there. My name is
Shaylin.
Shaylin, and I run an agency known as Project Amor, which is an acronym for a mouthful of Spanish speaking words. We work with special needs children, and we have after school programs, home and community-based services, and we do some transports as well to different outings in the communities, picking up from school, etc.
Thank you, Shaylin. I appreciate it. And then I'm going to circle back to Kimberly Trevino from Catholic Community Services. Hi, Kimberly. Kimberly, can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, apparently I'm talking to myself.
That's okay. It happens.
My name is Kimberly Trevino, and I'm the grant manager for Catholic Community Services Southern Arizona. And transportation is significant to our organization because since we serve the community in so many different agencies, especially with our COPD program and our Dali Center, the DEP, it's a significant portion of just them being able to do life. And we need the transportation.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And then Irma, I know you're in the same organization as Steve, but I wanted you to have an opportunity to introduce yourself as well.
Hi, I'm Irma Yamas. I'm the fleet manager and I work really closely with Steve, as Janine mentioned, and we're behavioral health. And we do a lot of transportation for to and from our locations and from the jail and hospitals and clinics and so forth.
Thank you so much. So I don't think I missed anyone. I know Meg's driving from and she's from the Tucson JCC. So unless she's in a place where she's able to pull over and park, I'm not going to ask her to do a more formal introduction. So I'll let Meg champion that if she feels like she can do that at this time. All right. So with that being said, I think that concludes our introductions. And we're going to go ahead and move on to the next item on our agenda. And so our next item on the agenda is always the in-kind form. And for those that may not be as familiar with this process, so regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. And so PAG collects that data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. So at this time, if you're paid with federal dollars, we ask you to let us know now so we do not account for your time in our in-kind data collection. So with that being said, time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PAG staff who are knowledgeable of the agenda and associated meeting materials. And at the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PAG and RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. So just as a quick recap, if your position is paid for either all or in part with federal dollars, please let me know now verbally, or please send me an email promptly letting me know that so that I don't account for your time during this meeting as part of our in-kind. All right. All right, that concludes our in-kind portion of the agenda. We're going to move on to item number 3 on the agenda, which is transit asset management, or we'll refer to in that space of keeping those assets in a state of good repair. And all of this is in alignment with the ADOT fiscal year 2023 Coordinated Mobility Program Guidebook, which pretty sure everyone's pretty familiar with or getting to be familiar with. So if you're not, this is the premise of this discussion is all the elements that are pertinent in the guidebook. So a couple things that I would like for us to kind of openly discuss around asset management is just all of our efforts collectively to keep vehicles and any kind of transit related equipment in a state of good repair. And so I'm looking for you to kind of share your best practices, your approaches, your procedures or policies that will allow for that to come to pass. So for those of you who might be applying for funding in the next fiscal year for 5310 funding, if you're familiar with the scoring criteria and the application, a lot of these pieces are commensurate with that. And so, especially under project management and your scope of work. So one of the things that is required of all of the agencies is to have a good asset management plan and policies and procedures such as your maintenance plan and your pre and post trip inspections, the way that you kind of figure out fleet life cycle. You know, when is a vehicle in your eyes deemed worthy of being disposed of, whether it be because it's cost prohibitive to maintain it or you're going to be seeking replacement in the future. Just kind of having those elements and kind of in your top of mind, or, you know, before you see to be proactive. Some other pieces are about making sure that you're aware of, I I guess you could say like factory or manufacturer guidelines, right? So what their expectation is with regard to that particular vehicle in terms of overall maintenance. And then for those that have ADA accessible vehicles, especially those with a lift, lift cycle counts are part of that. And there are very specific guidelines for that. And then, of course, annual inspections is a common point of discussion to make sure we're on time with the annual inspections. And then, of course, in the guidebook, just the understanding that when you take a vehicle in for inspection, you are essentially acknowledging that you agree to the results of that inspection. So making sure that you're understanding what that inspection process entails, and that when you sign off on the inspection form, you understand what you're signing for, and that information is getting communicated to ADOT. And then other pieces are just elements with regard to anything that be considered safety, so like brakes and things of that nature. And of course, your approach to communicating any changes in status or overall condition of the vehicle. And those, again, are all in alignment with what the guidebook says. So I'd like to kind of just take a few minutes to kind of chip away at each of these. And in an effort of doing this, I think some great best practices will come to light, which is an opportunity for you to kind of share or coordinate those resources with other agencies. And as you're very well aware in this program, we definitely encourage the sharing of resources, sharing of best practices, any type of coordination, to include obviously transportation coordination. So it's kind of a good start. So if we're not taking good care of our assets, it's hard to provide a good service transportation wise to those in our region. So let's just start out with kind of like maintenance plans and pre and post trip inspections, things of that nature. What are some policies or approaches that you're using in your own organizations to make sure that your assets are maintained in a state of good repair? And I'm just going to open up the floor to that.
So what
Some of
we
you
do
might be
here
talking
in-
into mute.
Oh,
So
sorry.
no, go ahead.
So what we do here in Tucson is that we do take the daily logs on each vehicle that's being used for the day. And we do have all vehicles set up for oil changes when they're required, maintenance checks, fluid. So doing that checklist gives us a really good view on what's needed or what needs to be replaced. But maintaining that daily usage is crucial for us, just to make sure that all the fluids and everything that's required for the vehicle to function properly is being assessed daily.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Anyone have anything to add in that?
Janine, this is Mike from Oro Valley.
Hi, Mike.
I'll do the lift count, I guess you'd say. So one, our drivers are required to cycle the lift every day on their pre-trip. Sometimes we use that vehicle twice in the day, in the morning and then in the afternoon. So it's being used at least twice that day. Plus, when we actually use it for passengers. But we also track the lift count at the end of every month. So we're actually doing that right now. So drivers come back from the route. There's a little count reader on the lift. So we count that, we track that. So per manufacturer, you have to get it inspected every 750 cycles or 6 months. And so we make sure that happens. When that does, we used to have, it's called Arizona Bus Sales, which used to be, I forgot what their name was. There used to be something else, Auto Safety House. They used to do it. It became very expensive. So we had our mechanics. Luckily, we have our own mechanics. We have our own mechanics that went through the Braun inspection school, which is just an online class. I think it was like 4 or 5 hours. So they got certified to do this lift inspection. So you have a 6-month inspection and you have an annual inspection. So that rotates between the two every year. So we track it. And then before it gets to the 750 or 6 month, then we do that inspection. We've also been able to get funding through the grant to pay for that. So that's all paid for to do the inspection.
Great, thank you, Michael. And I know you work closely with ADOT to get all those approvals to be able
Correct.
to get your mechanic certified. So I
Yes.
appreciate your tenacity and focus around that, because I know we've talked a lot about the benefits that approach has had for your organization. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, we, in the last grant that we did, 2023, we put money or got award for a certain dollar amount because we used to take them to the Arizona bus sales. And it was like $160, something like that per vehicle. I was like, wait a minute, time out. So we went through ADOT and said, hey, if we went through this class, we showed them what the class was, and to get our own mechanics certified. So now it used to, a couple days, their mechanics would come out to inspect the vehicle. Well, we were getting a little bit of, did you really look at the vehicle, or did you just run the lift up and down and said it was okay and off it went? So we had question about that, plus the expense. So we got ADOT to agree that we can do our own inspections. And with that grant that we received, we were able to give quite a bit of that money back, because now it's not costing us near as much as the Arizona Bus Center or sales company coming out and doing it. So that was very nice.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Anyone else have anything to share in that space? I'm going to move to one of the other bullet point items still within asset management, but it's about annual inspections. And I know that's everyone's favorite topic, annual inspections. So you probably received emails from me and members of ADOT staff regarding annual inspections. And I know coordinating inspections is not always easy with all of the particulars that each organization navigates every day. So everyone acknowledges that, but it is a very crucial compliance piece. And so with that, one of the things that we've collectively talked about is just really encouraging agencies that the moment you schedule it, even if that date hasn't come to pass yet, to communicate that to ADOT so that they have kind of an awareness that yes, they know you received their email saying, XYZ vehicle is due for inspection, but that email isn't just sitting in your inbox, that you've actually taken action on it and the inspections are scheduled. It's just, you have to wait for the calendar to move forward. So I know we've been kind of discussing that, through emails, et cetera, but just as a reminder, communicate. So as soon as you get those emails from ADOT and you see that there's some that need to be inspected, do your due diligence in getting those scheduled and then communicate that to ADOT that you have a date and or time established and you're just waiting for that calendar to move forward. In the same spirit, if you recognize that there is a disconnect somewhere, so you show on your records that you've already taken care of the inspection, but for whatever reason, it's not reflected in the ADOT system, please bring that to ADOT's attention. And of course, share with them a copy of the inspection sheet, just so they would have that copy on file, much like you would keep a copy in your records. And then in the same breath, if there has been a change in status or condition, which is something we'll also talk about here in the next couple bullet points, is that part gets communicated to ADOT as well. So if you look in the guidebook about any kind of change in status or condition, the guidebook says very clearly that it has to be reported to ADOT within 5 working days, even if a satisfactory repair can be made within that period. So I think that's kind of an opportunity where some people forget about that piece. They're like, oh, we're going to be able to fix it in just a few days. We don't necessarily need to report it. And It's easy to understand how people would think that, but if you look closely at the guidebook, that isn't in alignment with the expectation that it has to be reported within 5 working days, even if satisfactory repair can be made within that time period. The other part that I just wanted to kind of touch on when we were talking about annual inspections, and I do want to get some feedback around this, is just kind of cleaning up perceptions, I guess. Because I know the guidebook gets updated, for the most part every year, and there's different types of updates that show up. And ADOT does a good job of disclosing what those updates are in the first few pages of the guidebook, so you don't have to compare and contrast the entire document yourself relative to a previous document. They kind of tell you up front, these are the 5 changes, here's where they live. So it kind of makes it pretty easy for you to discern those. But depending on your level of involvement in the program, or if you're just kind of joining the program, some of those things might feel a little bit vague or ambiguous to you. So I thought we'd just kind of take a moment to kind of clean some of those pieces up. So in the guidebook, it says that you must have your vehicle taken in for an annual inspection all the way up until the time the vehicle is disposed of. And when you read the guidebook, and if you have a question about how to interpret or understand a particular sentence, please feel free and comfortable to ask that question to ADOT and to include myself. Because sometimes it's easy to read a sentence and kind of introduce other pieces to the sentence that aren't there. And sometimes that comes from information that we've had from the past that's been since changed or updated, or just, we use kind of our own rationale, and sometimes our own rationale isn't the same rationale as ADOT or the FTA. So we just really have to be careful about that. So when we read in the guidebook how an inspection is required all the way up through till the time the vehicle's been disposed of, some people kind of have an impression that that's only for vehicles that are still on lien with ADOT. So if it's no longer on lien with ADOT, that isn't a true statement. And so what I would encourage you to do is always ask if you have a question on clarity or context, but don't read anything more into what it says, or don't take anything away from something than it should. So it says in the guidebook, annual vehicle inspections are a requirement until the vehicle has been disposed of. It doesn't say for those that are on lien with ADOT, or does not apply to those that are not on lien with ADOT. It does not say that. It only says annual vehicle inspections are a requirement until the vehicle has been disposed of. So please follow that statement in the way that it's intended. So whether your vehicle is still on lien or has been taken off lien, until that vehicle has been disposed of, and it was, of course, funded through 5310, that annual inspection is still required. And if you take it to a third party, it's your responsibility to make sure that that vehicle inspection form gets sent up to ADOT. So I just want to kind of put that out there, because we've had a lot of questions through email and phone calls about just getting some clarification on that. And sometimes people are using older guidebooks, and I have to point them to the newer one. But just keep that top of mind. Now, ADOT could come out with a new guidebook next year, and maybe that policy will change. I don't know, but just something to keep in mind that for right now, that is how the guidebook is written. So I would encourage you to take a close look at where you sit with your annual inspections. And if you're showing any that are just came past due or are past due, to kind of clean that up and go ahead and get those scheduled, and then communicate to ADOT that you have them scheduled and you're just waiting for it to move forward. And then if they're not quite due yet, go ahead and be proactive and go ahead and try to get those scheduled. And again, of course, communicate that to ADOT. So with that being said, I'm sure some of you have some great practices on how you kind of keep tabs with all of that and make sure that your vehicles don't fall into the past due status. So if there's any kind of tricks of the trade that you'd like to share on how you're able to be successful with that, I think this is a great opportunity to share that. And again, that's part of coordination, and we'd like to share resources and and tips and solutions. So I'm going to open up the floor for that conversation regarding annual inspections. And I know some people are probably talking into mute, or so. Anyone have any best practices on what they do to make sure their vehicles are on time with annual inspections?
Janine, this is Mike, Town of Oro Valley. Nobody else is speaking, so I'll tell you what we do.
Okay.
So we've had a wide range of not issues, but concerns with the report that they send out. So we track our own to make sure that we're on time and we get our inspections done. The report they sent out, we've had vehicles that we've long sold, been disposed of a long time ago that have shown up. We have recently a vehicle that we just got this year, but they said it was due the inspection already. And so it just communicate, like you said, communicate with Edmund and yourself, letting them know that, hey, we just received this vehicle at this time. So the actual inspection is not due until next year. So we've had those kind of issues with that report for a while. And again, this was a while ago. We weren't getting any notification that they were required or due. That's why we started our own, just a regular Excel spreadsheet saying that, we did it this date, 365 days later, it's due again. So we have that, kind of on our billboard of things that need to be done. So we make sure it gets done. We've also had them done, but ADOT said that they were still due. So we saved those reports. And then when that happened, we just sent them a copy of the inspection sheet. So they were able to correct it on their side. So just different things, but our biggest thing that we've been able to do to make sure we're staying in compliance is we track it ourselves. As like you said, even if they don't tell you, the responsibility relies on the agency. If ADOT doesn't tell you it needs to be inspected, that's not their issue. It's still your responsibility to get it inspected. So that's what we do.
Very good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, on that note, I would encourage you that if you do decide to apply for funding in, the upcoming grant cycle, when you upload your vehicle inventory lists, to make sure that those are accurate as possible for obvious reasons. But sometimes my understanding is that sometimes the way that ADOT uses the data from what gets served up, it ties into how they reconcile some of the EQS reports, as I think they're referred to it. And I think we've seen a couple hiccups because of that. And so I've just encouraged people to just make sure that their fleet inventory records are really solid, just to avoid that potential from happening. But much like Mike had shared, the onus is always on the agency to make sure that they do the annual inspection. So even if for whatever reason you don't get an email announcement from ADOT saying that it's due, the expectation is that you're still mindful of it and following the expectation, which ties into just communicate. And if you see something that's wrong on the list, definitely bring it to ADOT's attention, because this way they can help you in the sense of cleaning up their database to make sure that doesn't to continue to happen. And as you can imagine, they have a lot of vehicles to manage and keep it track of with regarding inspections and other particulars for the entire state. And so things are bound to be off here and there, right? Like things happen. So but we can help. We can be a good partner in sharing when we see that something's not quite right to help it get fixed. So I'd encourage you to do that. But yeah, I think what Mike shared about keeping your own records and just being mindful of it and having those, dates and obviously a copy of the inspection available so that you can present it and say, I think this is not supposed to be on the list because we actually had it inspected. And then, of course, obviously for vehicles that have just been awarded, you would think that they wouldn't show up on the list. Now, I don't know if this is exactly 100% accurate, but I believe sometimes the date that gets put into EQS for new vehicles, the reason why it gets a little off it because I think it goes off of the date that ADOT receives it. And then ADOT has to do their own inspection before it actually gets delivered. And I think somewhere in there, it's supposed to kind of get reset and go based on the date that you receive it. And sometimes that doesn't happen, but don't quote me on that because that might not be an exact characterization, but I believe there might be at least a little bit of merit in it. All right, so change in status of condition or change in status or condition, we've kind of chatted about it briefly in the sense that, it has to be reported within 5 days. But that's the one thing that I think there could be a greater opportunity regionally. And I say could in the sense that maybe all of our vehicles are in exceptional state of good repair, and that's why I don't see too many reports of that. But and I'm hopeful that that's the case. But the part that makes me still want to bring it up is because in the guidebook it says must be reported within 5 working days. The emphasis is on working days, even if a satisfactory repair can be made within that time frame. So I'm just a little concerned that we might be just being really great stewards of assets and getting things repaired really timely within those 5 working days, but we're just not communicating that that came to pass. So I just want to make sure that we are communicating with ADOT on any elements that might be in that space, meaning a change in equipment of status or condition. So just be mindful of that. The other part is about safety equipment like, brakes, HVAC systems, wheelchair lifts, tires. Just be very cognizant of what the guidebook says regarding those particular features so that you can make sure that you're in compliance for that. And then I would encourage everyone to just really have a good understanding of what is meant by a state of good repair. So if you were to look at like the FTA guidelines, if you will, I think a kind of a universal definition is that it's the ability to maintain assets in a well-performed condition. So that means it has to follow your agency's maintenance plan scheduled as required. So even tying back to some of those vehicle manufacturer requirements, certain things are supposed to be done at certain intervals. But every agency is supposed to have like a process for how to restore or replace, their aging infrastructure. And so in the guidebook, you have guidelines, right? So you have vehicle minimum useful life guidelines that help you kind of navigate when's the earliest ADOT would consider it eligible for replacement without you having to kind of justify it because of perhaps, exorbitant maintenance cost or some other kind of condition. But there's also the TAM useful life benchmarks. I believe it's how it's characterized. So the TAM useful life benchmarks are kind of the point in which serious consideration is supposed to be made as to whether a vehicle should be replaced for safety reasons. And 5310 agencies aren't typically aligned with TAM useful life benchmarks. But there is kind of like an asterisk with that statement in that if you are a 5310 subrecipient, but you're serving the general public, and usually those agencies receive like operating funds through 5310, then you are subject to the TAM guidelines. So just make sure that you're reading the guidebook and understanding the expectation around those 2 different guidelines or benchmarks. For some vehicles, the guidelines and the benchmarks are pretty much exactly the same. There's very little variance, but for other vehicles, there is a pretty significant jump. So make sure that you're just aware of what is intended by the useful life guidance, meaning the minimum as per ADOT, and then also the TAM useful life benchmarks. And then just last reminder on that is in the guidebook, it says that vehicle useful life is not simply based on age or mileage. It's just one component that they use for considering replacement. It's the earliest time frame in which it could be considered for a replacement. And then with that, if one is replaced, it can be used as a backup or a spare once it's replaced. But then once it's replaced, you can't seek to replace it again, if that makes sense. So just keep those things in mind, because those are obviously big compliance components as far as asset management is concerned. And if anyone's kind of taking notes at home, so to speak, you can find nearly all of the stuff that we just kind of chatting about on page 33 of the guidebook. So if that's helpful, you can look at the fiscal year 23 ADOT guidebook and turn to page 20 or scroll down to page 33 and you should find all those particulars. All right, so we are gonna move on to agenda item number 4. And this is about record keeping best practices. And again, it's still in alignment with the guidebook. And this is a topic that we haven't talked about a lot in our working group meetings. We make mention of it in different, group emails that you see go out. We've talked about it a little bit through kind of our mock site visits and things of that nature. But I said, I think now is a good time to make sure that we just talk a little bit about record keeping best practices, because there is a lot of requirements with regard to record keeping. And of course, those are all outlined in the guidebook. And so for context, if you will, when you're looking at the guidebook for record keeping, some of the things that you should always keep in your files if you are awarded funding is obviously your application materials, right? So how did you apply for it? Any agreement documents, your exhibit A's, those would be important to keep. Of course, any reimbursement requests and, the backup documentation is going to be key. So most agencies don't have a whole lot of procurement files because typically a lot of the procurement is done through ADOT, but there are some instances in the equipment space is probably the best example where agencies perhaps could do their own procurement. So if that ends up being your story, you would want to make sure you have those procurement files. Your DBA, your LPA documents, your Title VI complaint logs, your EEO complaint logs, vehicle registration. And then of course, the topic that we were talking about a little bit ago, which is your vehicle pre-trip and post-trip inspection documents. And then any driver training records, and of course, any incidences. So for those that might be applying in the next grant cycle, and if you have applied before, that those are all parts of the grant application process. And the driver training is one component of that. It will ask you questions about that. So as you kind of look at your record keeping and your best practices, sometimes people kind of forget to take a look at that in preparation for the application. So I thought that'd be a good reminder. And then of course, your regular and of course your major maintenance and repair files, right? So back to that, keeping an asset in a state of good repair and, did you fix it? Especially if it was for a change in status or condition, or maybe it failed an inspection, and you've shared with ADOT that you fixed it. Do you have the documentation to back it up? So make sure you have those pieces. If you're awarded a vehicle, you should have your vehicle delivery or acceptance records or documents. Of course, insurance certificates are always important. ADOT usually asks for those at different times. And then, if any vehicles have been removed from your fleet, just documentation around that. Those are kind of the heavies, if you will. It's not an all-inclusive list, but those are a good start of things that should be in your record keeping. So if you were to look at the guidebook, it does say that if you're an agency that all of your records need to be stored or maintained in a way that if you were to be told that you're gonna have like a site visit or an audit, that those records or those documents would be ready and accessible to whoever might be coming to do a site visit or an audit. So the best time to make sure that you're prepared for something like that is before it happens. So making sure that you're in compliance with your record keeping and you have confidence that you know where those documents live. And then other people within your agency that might be asked to be a part of that discussion, that they know where they live as well, is always a good thing to be mindful of. Just on that note, tying back to the asset management, before I forget, because I did earlier, in eGrants, if you're an existing subrecipient or potentially a future applicant and you have an eGrants account, you want to make sure that whoever is assigned a role or responsibility with the eGrants that would normally get key pieces of information sent to your organization from ADOT is listed and updated. So you want to make sure if there's been any change in role, like someone got promoted, they're not in that department anymore, or they're still in that department, but they're just not overseeing this particular part of the process, or someone left the organization. You just want to make sure that those points of contact are updated and then they have the right, permissions or roles assigned. And if you've lived in eGrants before, you'll know that there's different permissions, if you will. Like some people only have read only, some people have kind of read write. There's just different permissions. So make sure those pieces are up to date, so you don't want to miss any key information from ADOT. All right. So I wanted to open up the floor to kind of have a discussion about how you as an organization that has been part of the program for a while kind of champions all this. Like, do you just have one person that oversees it, or is it kind of split out across departments? Is there software that you use? Like, what is kind of your approach? Because I think that could be helpful for people who might be just starting out and trying to figure out what this program is about and how can they be successful right out of the gate. But it also could be helpful for people that have been doing this a long time, but they're just like, you know what? We might not have it all just figured out just yet. I'm sure we could learn from somebody else. So we're kind of interested in how other people do it. And then, of course, if you feel like you've got it down pat, you can kind of have some bragging rights and say, you know what, we do really great in this space, and we'd like to share, what we do. So I'm going to open it up and for kind of how you are tackling this component of record keeping.
Well, Michelle in Tucson, now we're just documenting it on paper, but I wanted to transition that into an Excel spreadsheet. If anybody has any programs that are better for more efficiency, please, by all means, share.
Thanks, Michelle. Does anyone have any suggestions or tips for Michelle?
Do you have anything specific that you're looking for? Lift tracking or mileage tracking or maintenance?
All of that.
All of the above.
Yeah.
If you want to share with Janine, or Janine, you can give me their stuff and we can share some of our spreadsheets.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
So, Michelle, what I'll do is I'll reach out to you, and by extension, I will match you up, so to speak, with Michael and Carl from Town Oro Valley, and the two of you could connect and kind of reconcile, what would be helpful, what would not be helpful, and exchange that information. Yeah.
Thank
So, welcome. Thank you, Michael. Anyone else have any tips or thoughts on how they champion record keeping? Because I know we have some really small organizations, in terms of size and reach in our organization, in our region. Then we have other organizations that are very, very large, and so some agencies need something very, very sophisticated and to meet their particular need and bandwidth, and other agencies don't necessarily need something quite as robust. But the bones, if you will, of what make those different platforms or tools work is still helpful. So even if you're a large organization, it's still helpful to kind of share what you do. and how you navigate certain things for those that might be a little bit smaller, because there's still some great takeaways.
You know,
And
this
vice
is
versa.
so-
Sometimes smaller organizations have to be really resourceful, and because their budgets can be smaller, and they have, you know, great tips or techniques as well. So it goes both ways.
Janine, this is Steve with Hope. I was just gonna say, we have a spreadsheet that we use for each vehicle that we keep all the information, anything that's happened to the vehicle, good, bad, or ugly. Irma keeps that updated. And then we also have a backup hard copy system. So every vehicle has its own binder, and if you were the auditor, you could come in, pull that open, and it's got all the receipts, all the insurance information, registration information, all the daily logs, all the inspection sheets. So we try to make finding the information on each vehicle as easy as possible in case either Irma or myself fall off the face of the earth. It's there and accessible, and anybody can access it. So we know where each vehicle is sitting.
Good. Thank you, Steve. And if anyone wants to kind of connect with Steve in their own time, you know, feel free to reach out to me, and then I can chat with Steve and see how we might connect the two of you together. I know Beacon Group is not on this call today, but a few years back, for those that remember, we did one of our meetings at the Beacon Group. And Steve, you jarred my memory on this, and you might have something kind of similar to them. But they have a lot of binders that are specific to all their processes. And so if there would be another resource to you potentially, is to potentially reach out to Beacon Group and see what they do in championing their fleets and their records, because I know they have a pretty robust process as well. So right out of the gate, we kind of have three really great opportunities for people to get connected: Town of Oro Valley, Hope, and then potentially Beacon Group. But I don't want to speak for them. I just remember they had a really great program when we visited there a while back. So, all right, anyone else? Or just maybe even just generalized questions like, hey, how does someone do X? You know, if you have a very specific question that you'd like to ask, to be a little bit more intentional instead of perhaps, you know, such a generalized statement. If there's a question someone has.
Hey, Janine, this is Ryan with United Community Health Center.
Hey, Ryan, how are you?
Pretty good. Hey, I got a
Hey, do you
question.
want to do a quick introduction? Because I don't think I got to get your introduction earlier.
Yeah, this is Ryan Gillespie. I'm with United Community Health Center. I'm the Director of Facility Operations here. I've been here going on 16 years, and we do primary care for the rural healthcare community.
Very good, thank you.
Is it a possibility for ADOT to put together some sort of a folder or something they can use for, I know that when there's a lot of new people, they kind of get lost.
Mhm.
And a lot of us might have different spreadsheets or not have spreadsheets. Is it possible to come up with something to where there's a collective of everybody's stuff that, if they're willing to share, put together, and people can go in and dig in that file and say, oh, look at this, I can use this, or I can use this one, or this would work for our, you know, our department? Or is there something like that could happen?
That's a good question. Kind of like a SharePoint file where people can just go, almost like Dropbox, where people can go in and see the different tools or resources that other agencies are using to be successful. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
Yeah, because
I can definitely reach out.
I've been in transportation for quite a while now, and I still don't know everybody. And there's a lot of people that come and go, and there's a few of us that have stuck around. But
yeah,
when they're new people, or there's new people, it'd be nice to be able to just go, okay, let me look in here and see what they've got or what's available for me to be able to use.
Right. No, that's a good suggestion. Let me bring that to ADOT's attention and see what they can do, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome.
That's a good suggestion. Thank you. All right. Anything else before we move to the next item on the agenda? All right, so we're gonna go ahead and move to the next item on the agenda, which should be safety training updates. And so, in case you haven't guessed, this is in alignment with the guidebook, right? So, one of the things that in the guidebook they being ADOT references is just everything as the title would suggest, right? Safety related. So those pieces are kind of tying back to some of the things that we've already chatted about, which is like driver training. So defensive driving techniques would be an example of that. ADA accommodations, right? So wheelchair securements, what we refer to as PASS training, right? So, passenger sensitivity, et cetera. So, and then with that, obviously, the lift cycle counts and just making sure that ramps or lifts are properly maintained. But then there's other pieces, right? So it can be safety procedures. What happens when a vehicle breaks down or there's some kind of development on a vehicle, whether it be, flat tire or the air conditioning goes out and it's really hot out or, something else. So what are those, emergency procedures? Some agencies might have actually like emergency evacuation procedures because of storms or other types of scenarios. Then, there's RTAP based training. And I don't know if you've looked at RTAP recently or ever, but if you're not familiar with RTAP, other than the conversations for scholarships to attend different workshops or conferences, I would encourage you to take a look at the RTAP website because they have so many different training resources. Vast majority of, if not all of them, are free. There's all kinds of toolboxes and toolkits to help you get started. So that's always a really good place to look, even if it's just for inspiration, but it also can save you a lot of time from like reinventing the wheel, right? So take a look at RTAP if you haven't, but those are some things definitely in the safety space that they champion really well. So take a look at that. Obviously, inspections are part of safety, right? We want to make sure our vehicles are well maintained and that they've been inspected in a timely fashion to illustrate that. Air conditioning systems, some people might not argue that it's a safety issue, but for those that have lived in this part of the country long enough during the summer, or should I say just this weekend, you'll know it gets kind of warm. And the lack of AC can be at the very least very uncomfortable, but for some people it could be, life-threatening, I guess you could say, right, if they're exposed to the heat too long. So I kind of put AC under the safety umbrella because I think there is a safety component given the unique temperatures that we faced here in this region. So, and then I've said lifts, and then the last thing, just being cognizant of like your turnaround times and service intervals, especially when you're trying to be proactive on maintenance. Some maintenance elements take a bigger lift, no pun intended with the ADA accommodation. But just like there's more time for the vehicle to be down to get that kind of maintenance done, whether it's on the proactive or the reactive side. And then, of course, as you know, some elements, like once you tackle that one, you might as well go ahead and tackle a couple other things like water pumps and stuff like that, because most of the heavy lifting is in removing a few components. And if you're going to kind of spend all the labor to tackle those, you might as well tackle a few other things. But with supply chain challenges that we've lived through in the past, and just you never know how long it could take for a certain part to come in for a particular vehicle, just kind of being cognizant of that and knowing what you might be up against in the event of that kind of repair, and just being able to plan appropriately, not just for the vehicle being down and out of your fleet and just what it takes to kind of run that project management piece, but just the impact it has to your service and those that you serve. So just being mindful of that. So, questions, comments, concerns about anything in the safety space, because this is a big topic and it has kind of like tentacles, if you will, into a lot of different spaces. But I think it's something that's really important to be mindful of. And we haven't talked about it in the working group in a while. We might have talked about one specific thing, but not all of these as a collection. So I wanted to allow for some opportunity to chat about it. I'm curious what some agencies do to make sure that their air conditioning in their vehicle stays running, so they don't run into particular situations where, AC goes out and when they're serving, vulnerable people in our region. And then if any agencies actually do have any kind of emergency evacuation plan, anything like that, just kind of get a sense of all the different things that agencies across our region are doing under the veil of safety. Or safety training is probably what I should say.
Janine, I was wondering if people on this call who are in the heart of the program could tell us what their approach is to training their drivers. Who do they use to do driver training and safety procedures?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question, Nicole. Thank you. Anyone want to take an opportunity to share what they do? I know, Steve, you have a whole process, and so does Mike. Mandy, do you have anything to share in that space? I'm gonna put Mandy on the spot. But does anyone have anything they'd like to share?
Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself.
It's okay.
Yeah, so we do use the PASS training. We don't use it for every single driver because a lot of our drivers are support staff, so driving is a part of what they do, but we use that as a guide. We do a very specific training on every vehicle, tie down how to operate the vehicle, driving the vehicle, having somebody, go with you to make sure that you're, especially, our bigger ones with the lifts. So yeah, so we have a vehicle training checklist that we go through. We have a transportation manual with all of our policies and procedures around transportation that's in each vehicle that our drivers can access. And then of course, CPR first aid, trainings like that. I hope that's helpful.
Mandy, do you do all those in-house, meaning like it's your own folks training your own folks, or do you contract out to somebody?
It is all in-house. And we do have 2 PASS trainers here in Tucson. So, if anybody was interested, we would be more than happy to collaborate on providing some of that. And inviting anybody over to go through and I'm happy to share it with the group too, but what all is, part of that training, what's part of our checklist, everything that we go through and go over.
That'd be great. And Mandy, do you know if, and maybe you could just circle back with me after the meeting, but do you know if you have any trainers, PASS trainers that are train the trainer certified, or if yours are only, just trained to train individuals?
Yeah, they're to train individuals, but I know through the I'm not going to get the website right off the top of my head, but they do have train the trainer options. It's I think it's like $600, which of course you can get an RTAP reimbursement for, but I know that is available out there for individuals.
I think it's through CTAA, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. You're absolutely right. CTA.
So, so with that, so thank you, Mandy, for bringing that to light, because that's a valid point, and I encourage people to take a look at that. And if you need further guidance on how to find it or the link, I'm more than happy to send it out to the group. But the mobility manager in the Seago region, she actually champions a lot of different trainings in the PASS training segment. And I know other mobility managers also champion opportunities for for people to get certified as a past trainer for their own organization or to be certified as like a train the trainer. So if that's something that's of interest to you, one of the ways that we're able to champion it efficiently and effectively is to kind of be able to get a sense of what the need is in each of the different regions, and then figure out how can we put it into practice in a way that allows for maximum participation and in a place that is most strategically located, right? So maybe people who are interested in getting certified in the PAG region and the SEGO region, we can find a good place and good time and date to do it. But that time and date in our region might not be the best fit for folks that are all the way out in Yuma, right? They might want to partner with a different region. So we try to make sense of what the landscape looks like across the entire state, and then try to look at also regionally, and then see how we can make it work. And I know a lot of the train the trainer trainers, that's a lot to say, isn't it? They're willing to travel, to meet those needs, but the best way we could plan for it is just having a strong sense of what the need is. So the more that you're able to communicate, like, hey, we have a need, and here's kind of our time frame, and here's how many people we'd like to send through the training, I can serve that up to different people that I know that champion that, and we can move forward and get your folks trained. So if you have a heart for that, or you want to get some of your folks trained, whether it be as a past trainer or as a train the trainer, let me know, and we can get you pointed in the right direction. So thank you, Mandy. I appreciate that, and hopefully that was helpful. Anybody else have any thoughts on how they champion their training, whether they do it in-house or externally, or a specific topic that they feel like they excel at? Just kind of tying back to, I think it was Nicole's question. Steve, do you have any insights on how you do your driver training? I'm going to pick on Steve and Irma.
Steve had to leave really quick. He has to go do a safety thing. I was talking about safety. But we do everything in-house as well, and we do everything through Relias. We put all the stuff into there, and then we have all the new hires go through that. And then once they do that, safety modules that we put up there with, then we do them individually in person with me. And I walk them through to do the tie downs for the wheelchairs, the lifts, and the securing and of all that. I do that in person, and also drive with them along, do around the block per se, in the vehicles as well. So it's all in-house.
Thank you, Irma. I appreciate it. Anyone else? All right, so I'm gonna tie back to the question about like the air conditioning. If anyone has information they'd like to share on how they kind of fight that constant need to make sure the air conditioning in vehicles stays running with our unusual temperatures at times.
Well, this is Irma. That's part of our maintenance upkeep on it. So when we take it in to get oil changes and stuff, they check all of that. So there's like a 52-point thing that they do for us. And they look at all that and get it fixed if we need to at that time.
Thank you. Does any organization actually have like their AC service specifically, so many months in advance of our time frame for having hotter temperatures than other parts of the country? Does anyone do that? Is there any other approaches that people are using? And then just as a quick sense for the RTAP based training, is there anyone that isn't familiar with the resources that are available through RTAP that might find it helpful to get pointed in the right direction on that? There's no shame in not knowing. I'd rather people tell me that they're not familiar with it, so I can get them familiar with it, than just assuming that they are and find out that they weren't.
Yeah, I'm Michelle in Tucson is not familiar with it. So any
Okay.
information you can send my way, I'd be grateful.
All right, I will do that, and then also send out information about CTA, like Mandy had mentioned, for
Okay,
like the past. So I'll just send it out to the entire group, both sets of information, and then you can do with it as you see fit. And then Michelle, if you have very specific questions pertinent to what I send out, we can chat and
okay,
connect, and it can help answer, more specific questions. And that's the same applies to everybody else. If there's something that you see and you have questions about it, feel free to reach out to me, and we can either do through email, or we could set us some time aside and do like a Teams meeting and kind of unpack it together. And then sometimes we bring someone from ADON on board in the call because they have a perspective that I wouldn't have on my own. And we respect and appreciate their insight and wisdom on that. So just do that as appropriate. All right. Anything else? Someone would like to add that they do in the safety or driver training space? So as people think about what they might want to share as like a best practice, I'm just going to remind everyone, because of what I said before about coordination being important. So if you are on the receiving end of a coordination effort, you are still coordinating, right? Because you are being open to sharing best practice, or being the recipient of a best practice that's being shared and putting it into action. So you still want to try to capture that and document that that's what you're doing. And in the same breath, if you are a person that's sharing information and sharing resources, sharing links, sharing whatever tips or approaches that you use to be successful, especially in compliance areas, etc., you want to make sure you're documenting that, and especially if there's some results that come from it. So for example purposes, when we did the mock site visits a while back, different people took away different things regarding pre and post trip inspections, maintenance plans, etc. And so when an agency actually was able to revise or update their maintenance plan because of what was shared by another entity, that's kind of one brief example of some results that came from people sharing information. So whether you're the giver or the receiver, you still want to document your efforts to coordinate. So just keep that in mind. I think sometimes it's easy to remember to document it when you're the person that does the sharing, but sometimes it's not as obvious to perhaps document if you're on the receiving end. And then of course, any results that happen from the sharing of resources or sharing of efforts, you both parties would want to document that, because those are helpful things to keep in mind, especially for future grant cycles. All right, any questions in the safety and training space before we move on that I can try to help answer in the moment, or at least to reach out to the proper individuals to get the answers? All right, I don't see any hands up. Suggesting anyone has something they want to share. So as we kind of draw this meeting to a close, because we're getting ready to move to the next agenda item, please be mindful of the things that we've kind of discussed in this meeting, and kind of take a look and do your own self-assessment on where you sit with things. And like I said, communicate when it comes to, vehicle inspections, etc. But that also translates to like things that Ryan was saying, like, hey, how can we pull all these tools and resources together so that whether you're new to the program or more seasoned, everybody kind of knows where to look. But also, there's other people that are doing the same work as you. They just might come at it from a different angle, or they might serve different clients, but they're still championing the same compliance related components. And there's really no need to kind of reinvent the wheel if you can just kind of lean on your neighbor and say like, hey, what do you do? So the examples that we have is, people on this call ask like, hey, can you connect me with, town of Oro Valley so that I can get help in this particular space? Or can I get connected to CTAA so that I can take advantage of opportunities for past training, et cetera? Those are all, great examples of people being willing to ask for help. So I encourage you to ask for help from me so that I can support you well, but also, be willing to ask, other agencies that are part of this working group, because you all have a unique perspective that perhaps I don't have because I don't do the work that you do, but there's other agencies that are doing very similar work and championing the same compliance elements, but they can speak to it through a different lens than I can. So I think there's value in that. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move to the last item on the agenda, which is usually everyone's favorite, which is adjournment. So I'm going to go ahead and if there aren't any other questions or concerns that need to be discussed, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you so much for being a part of today's working group meeting. And I'm going to give you the rest of your day back. Have a